I will always stand up for Canadians' rights. I will always stand up for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's what Canadians expect of me. As I've said a number of times as well, I don't think it should be the government's business to tell a woman what she should or shouldn't be wearing. But we know there's going to be many weeks and many months of discussions on this, on what the implications are. And as a government, as a federal government, we're going to take our responsibilities seriously and look carefully at what the implications are.
And we're back with the Power Panel, Paul, Marie, Mia, and Aaron. And Paul, let me begin with you. Prime Minister Trudeau was in Alma, Quebec, talking about Bill 62 there. Was his answer too careful there?
No, I think it was fair. It's not normally the business of federal governments to enter court challenges against provincial legislation, especially in the absence of any caseload. We don't know how this law is going to be implemented. The Prime Minister's position, as far as I can tell, is identical to Jagmeet Singh's in the NDP.
But not as forceful, though.
Yeah, I mean, scrum them each 3 more times, and they'll give you three more levels of forcefulness. You know, they don't like the law, and they're going to see what happens. What's likely to happen is the law will get challenged, and it will collapse under the weight of its own absurdities. But and probably when tested against Quebec's Bill of Rights, not against the Federal Charter of Rights. But you know, in the meantime, people who were hoping that the Prime Minister would sort of charge in and fix everything are going to be disappointed. Just about the only people who are being really vociferous about this are members of provincial governments outside Quebec who seem to have some sort of didactic point to make or some points to score with their domestic electorates.
You're talking about Ontario.
I'm talking about Ontario. I'm talking about Rachel Notley.
Right.
They're lining up around the block to say it's a lawful law. I don't disagree, but I have a hard time imagining any actual Prime Minister who would challenge it at this stage.
So, Marie, a lot of politicians across the country outside Quebec saying this is not a good law. Has Premier Couillard made the case for this legislation as to why Quebec needs it?
Well, it's unclear whether Premier Couillard wants this bill to survive a legal challenge. There are people in Quebec who feel they have a more cynical analysis of the situation. And I was talking to Julius Gray, who's a constitutional lawyer in Montreal, who was saying, you know, some would wonder if this bill was just drafted in time for next year's election and then in a way to never be applied afterwards. Because the way the bill is drafted, there's this face-covering ban in the public service to obtain or to grant public services. But there's also accommodations that can be granted. So someone can ask to not have to unveil their face for X, Y, and Z reason. And the decision to grant or not that accommodation is up to the service provider, which essentially means that anyone granting the service could just decide to not apply the law. And the Justice Minister of Quebec has recognized this week that there is no criminal sanction if you don't apply the law, which explains, I think, why the City of Montreal has said they don't want to apply it. Laval, which is the north suburb of Montreal, but second biggest city in Quebec, has said they are hesitant to apply it as well. The Public Transit Company of Montreal, and actually all big city public transit companies have told us at Le Devoir that for now nothing changes and they're not sure that they will apply it. All that to say, it might never actually even happen that people can't get on the bus with their faces veiled. But to go back to Justin Trudeau, I completely agree with Paul that it would have been surprising to see him come out much harsher on the bill because he's actually Prime Minister of the whole country, not just a province, and he has 40 seats in Quebec and a by-election on Monday that they are hoping to win and steal that riding from the Conservatives. And so I don't think it was surprising. I do feel, though, that today, after a lot of people criticizing how muted his response was, columns criticizing it, people on Twitter, he did seem to go a tiny bit further to me by saying, yes, we'll respect the charter, but also the rights of a Quebec legislature, but we will assume our responsibilities. To me, I mean, we're, you know, analyzing tweaks, but to me that was one tiny step further, which seemed to indicate that he was definitely leaving the door open to challenging this or helping someone challenge it.
Mia, should we expect a challenge by the federal government?
No.
No.
Long and the short of it, no. Well, and for many reasons that Marie just talked about. I mean, yes, they have a by-election on Monday. Trudeau doesn't want to wade into provincial politics in Quebec at a time when he is seeking out a new seat, and he doesn't want to do this even going into the next election. He doesn't want to give anybody in Quebec fodder to say that the federal government is coming in and telling us how we should run the province. He's not the prime minister that's going to do that, and I don't think any other prime minister or party leader is going to suggest really that he should be doing that. So no, I don't think they're going to challenge it. This is a Quebec law. They're going to wait and see what happens in Quebec. And they also know that they don't have to waste too much political capital on it because it's going to die within Quebec, very likely. So why would the Prime Minister actually take any effort, lose some political points in Quebec by going after something that's provincial jurisdiction when they don't think it's going to survive anyway?
Aaron, why did Kathleen Wynne decide to enter the fray when it comes to this issue? What's her rationale behind this?
I mean, I think as Paul notes, it's easy to score points on this, especially if you don't have any responsibility for dealing with the legislation. You know, you could arguably apply the same kind of idea to what Justin Trudeau how he used to express himself on these issues, on the Charter of Values, on Jason Kenney's attempt to ban the Niqab during citizenship oaths. He was very outspoken, or came to be very outspoken on those issues. And that, I think, is the problem he's having now, is that he doesn't sound like he did then. The difference now, of course, is that there's a Federalist Premier that is proposing a law that's difficult. The application issue, I think, is a real issue. The other thing is that the federal government really only has a couple of options here. You know, when the Prime Minister says, I'm not going to challenge, it's not the federal government's place to challenge this. There's a legal basis for that. And that's that the government doesn't really have standing to challenge this law. They can't really say that they are being impacted by it. So he would have to either intervene, the federal government would have to either intervene in an existing challenge or refer it directly to the Supreme Court, the second move being fairly dramatic. So if the government's going to move here, you would assume it's going to be somewhere on that intervention. There's going to be a challenge. The federal government will seize the opportunity and intervene. In the meantime, there's going to be this rhetorical debate about whether or not he's being strong enough and outspoken enough on it. If he ends up intervening in it, I suspect that will be moot. But you can, it's the difference between how he sounded, how strident he was in 2015 and how he is now. I think that's the root of the problem.